welcome to this videocast and podcast for subscribers to davidicke.com. Well, we have another divide and rule schism unfolding in Britain, and that is between a large number of young people and the older generation. And it's about the way the voting went in the EU referendum. And the older generations were the ones that overwhelmingly voted to come out, and younger people overwhelmingly voted to stay in. And I'm going to address this schism today because some outrageous things have been going on and been said in relation to older people for expressing their right to an opinion. But there's another schism unfolding, which is just as important, and that is between young people with a mind of their own and a great swathe of young people, those that are complaining now, who have given their minds away to such an extent that they have become little more than computer terminals on the state's internet. It's been my enormous pleasure over the years to see how many young people, despite going through this massive programming operation called education, whether it's school or whether it's college, university, all together, and the media confirmation that the perception programming that they've had from education, the state's version of everything, is true, and people should believe it, and all the institutions doing the same. It's extraordinary how many young people have still not succumbed to the program and are able to look at the world and events from their own perspective and actually have the self-respect to do their own research rather than just taking it from the state as read. So, they are amazing people because, I've been saying for a long time that, I feel for young generations today because of the scale of perception programming that they are put through from the moment now they enter the world virtually. And I understand why people have bought the perception download and stand on the same postage stamp consensus with everybody else. But it's very, very dangerous to what's left of freedom. And if people want to buy the program, that's up to them. But the way they impose their own programming on everyone else by insisting that you can't say this, you can't do that, because it doesn't suit their perception program, well, that is quite something else and needs to be urgently challenged. Because while we have this emerging and gathering number of young people who are taking their minds back or not giving them away in the first place, we also have the polarity of that, which is the politically correct, deeply uninformed, deeply programmed, what I refer to as generation jelly, where they can't be upset by anything, including an opinion they don't agree with. And this generation jelly is being systematically molded to become the generations jelly in adult life, which the state will be able to control without any challenge whatsoever. I mean, we've got a situation here now where we've just left an extraordinarily extreme, and it's nowhere near where it's meant to be and meant to go, an extreme centralized dictatorship called the European Union. Or at least we've voted to leave. They're going to do what they can to stop that, clearly, as I said, within 2 hours of the vote. But we've at least voted to leave this dictatorship. And yet the young generations of Generation Jelly, not the ones with a mind of their own, are complaining that they've been got out of jail and their children and grandchildren got out of jail by the older generation. An older generation that has the experience of what life was like before we joined the EU. Anyone younger than their kind of early 40s will not have known a country before the EU. They only know what they've been brought up with, so it's their normal. And Britain before the EU was not perfect, but my goodness me, at least decisions affecting this country were being made in this country by people, at least officially, that you could see, instead of bureaucrats that people can't even name. We had the extraordinary sight of this Labour Party politician, Harriet Harman, on a television interview, pushing to stay in the EU, who was shown the presidents of the EU, including the main one, Juncker, who is in the news all the time. And she was asked to name them. And she couldn't. She didn't know anything about them. And this is what has happened with so many young people. They have bought the party line of the political establishment and the moneyed and political classes and just repeated it and accepted it without question, without any background research of their own into the nature of the EU and why so many people wanted to come out. So we have this this generation jelly that thinks it's progressive. That means, heart on the sleeve, all that stuff, but isn't, quite the opposite. That thinks it's anti-racist when all it can see is race everywhere. And it says it believes in democracy. Well, clearly it doesn't, because it wants a second referendum when we've just had one that's voted one way, but they don't like it. Democracy to Generation Jelly is only when the result suits them. They say they believe in fairness and justice and diversity, when actually they're destroying all of those things. What's diverse about shutting down opinions that you don't agree with? We've now got this this generation emerging that wants safe spaces where no one says anything that can upset them. How can you possibly move on in your understanding of anything unless your beliefs are challenged? Or not even challenged, that someone else can say something different. And these progressives that believe in freedom and justice and democracy have this now incredibly Orwellian term of deplatforming people, which means banning them from speaking and having their right to free speech if they're going to say something that might upset the jelly spine that somehow they walk around with. And when I grew up in the 50s and the 60s, particularly the 60s, before the EU, of course, the student populations used to march for freedom of speech. Now they march and campaign against it. I mean, hello? And what they've allowed themselves to do is to download this off the peg, postage stamp perception of everything. And of course, the school system, the college and university system, academia in general, not least because many of them and many institutions are on the EU payroll, are all pro-EU, all pushing the EU. And that's what these people have grown up with. But instead of saying, well, hold on, I'm going to do my own research here, I'm going to see if that stands up, they just accept it. And so we have this extraordinary attack, not by young people with minds of their own, but by Generation Jelly, against older people. And this is a story this week. I mean, it is extraordinary. This is the headline: Media pushes ban on old people voting after Brexit. Older people were far more likely to vote to leave the European Union. And having lost the argument, supporters of Remain are blaming them, insult them, and even arguing their democratic rights should now be curtailed. The demographic divide in last week's vote was stark, it says. The more working class, poor, old, and uneducated people are, statistically, the more likely they were to support Brexit. The more wealthy, metropolitan, young, urban, and educated, the higher is the chance they backed the EU bureaucracy. One big mistake there. Educated. They're not educated. That's the problem. They're programmed. Because that's what the education system is. It's a programming system to get people for life to see everything in the way the state wants them to see it. And of course, the state wants them to see the European Union as some benevolent, wonderful organization when it is a centralized, bureaucratic, merciless dictatorship. So educated, the more educated you are, no, the more programmed you are, the more likely you are to unquestioningly follow the state line. And, working class, poor, old, uneducated doesn't mean fricking stupid, but this arrogant Generation Jelly believes that. Oh, they haven't been to university, they're stupid. Well, you've been to university and look at you. Bloody hell. And working class and poor, uneducated, it doesn't mean they're stupid. It means actually that they can work things out for themselves. And it also means that they've not been through that long period of their formative years downloading the state's version of everything. So maybe they have a modicum of a mind of their own still, unlike Generation Jelly. Story goes on. Of course, barely concealed contempt for the working classes, particularly the white poor, is nothing new to social media or the liberal press, but the all-out attacks on senior citizens post-referendum has shocked many. Headlines in the Europhile press have included how old people have screwed over the younger generation from The Independent, which isn't, and EU referendum results, young screwed by older generations from the Huffington Post. Yes, the Leave voters have voted against all laws and regulations and rules that have any significance whatsoever being made. It's like 50, 60% now, but they want the lot. That's what the whole EU agenda is about. That all those decisions and impositions will be made by dark suit bureaucrats that people can't name, and most of them never see. Whoa, what a terrible thing to do to young people. And then we've got Vice gave us, the article says, old people seem intent on fucking us over forever. And Brexit proves baby boomers should get less of a vote. The progressives speak. We are educated. We are highly intelligent. If someone says something different to us, they must therefore, by definition, be wrong and stupid. Mirror anybody? Like I say, democracy is only any good to them if it suits what they want to do. GQ magazine went all out, the article says, producing "We should ban old people from voting." Writing about them, as if the older generations are some foreign species, the reasons given by the author included: the EU referendum result will have less effect on older people. Over 65s read the Daily Mail. What, all of them? What? There was no golden age of Britain. No, there wasn't. But there was an age when we made our own decisions. And dark suit bureaucrats didn't. We take pensioners' driving licenses away. Why not their right to vote? Progressives. God dear. Imagine if they were fascist. Extraordinarily chilling, that is. It's Orwellian and then some, and it's the way Generation Jelly is being led down to this global Orwellian state that I've been exposing for so long. The article says it's hard to tell where the satire ends and explicit generational loathing begins. Another quote from this article. Aside from a pathological preoccupation with immigration, the most pervasive reason for the Grey Army voting leave is an inarticulate longing to return to the hazy memories of an idealised Britain that never was, GQ informs us. You mean returning to making our own decisions within the land those decisions affect? Eh? Dear. And it says here, in line with others, political blogger Kevin Drum, for it is he, attempted to dismiss the free will and rational decision-making of the elderly, writing, "At its core, this is the last stand of old people." It ain't, mate. Who have been frightened to death by cynical right-wing media empires and the demagogues who enable them. Well, if ever the truth was inverted, it's in that sentence. And I don't know where you live, Mr. Drum, but wherever it is, it will be somewhere in the land of the bewildered. The cynical right-wing media empires and demagogues. One of the things that is extraordinary about the young people and the progressives who voted to stay in the EU is that, I don't know whether they noticed, but they lined up with the entire political establishment and the political classes right across this so-called political spectrum, from Labour across to Conservative. They lined up with the global financial cabal, including Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, Citigroup, the City of London, and they lined up, the IMF, another one, and they lined up also with people like Tony Blair. Anybody remember what he did in Iraq? Anybody remember what he did to so many people in terms of death, destruction, maiming, vast numbers of people. Oh, Tone wants to stay in the EU. Of course he does, because he's part of the same web of those others that I've just mentioned. And progressive young people line up with that lot. You having a laugh? But they don't see it. They don't see it. Here's another guy that they lined up with. CFR member, that's the Council on Foreign Relations in America, that basically drives US foreign policy with other groups, including what's gone on in the Middle East, by the way. CFR member calls on elites to rise up against ignorant masses. You still think you're on the right side, eh? With these people that want to stay in the EU. This guy is the wealthy heir to the Bloomingdale luxury department store chain. And he sneers, the article says, at populist voters who cherish, quote, values and tradition. Ooh, condemn them. Stop them voting. In a column for Foreign Policy magazine, Council on Foreign Relations member James Traub argues that the elite need to rise up against the mindlessly angry, ignorant masses in order to prevent globalization, the centralization of global power in fewer and fewer hands, from being derailed by the populist revolt that led to Brexit. And you know, a lot of these people who are condemning the older generations for bringing us out of the EU, they will actually go on marches, some of them, against globalization and what it's doing. What they don't realize is the EU is fundamentally part of that whole globalization exercise. It's the centralization of power. And at every point you centralize power, fewer and fewer people have control to dictate the lives of more and more. I would say, you know, be educated, get educated, but you know, this generation jelly perceives education as going through universities and schools and stuff. Education, real education, is education yourself, not being told what to think. This guy Traub, he's concerned that, quote, today's citizen revolt in the United States, Britain and Europe may upend politics as nothing else has in my lifetime. Good. Traub notes that Brexit was an utter repudiation of bankers and economists, except by Generation Jelly, that complains about bankers, and an example of how extremism has gone mainstream. That's another Orwellian inversion. Wanting freedom to make decisions within your own, within the borders of the area affected by those decisions is extremism. Giving that power to bureaucrats you can't name, that is the opposite of extremism. That is being reasonable. That is being moderate. That's being progressive. And it says here, another quote from this bloke, with prospects of flat growth in Europe and minimal income growth in the United States, voters are rebelling against their dismal long-term prospects. And globalization means culture as well as economics. Older people whose familiar world is vanishing beneath a welter of foreign tongues and multicultural celebrations are waving their fists at cosmopolitan elites. This is another area. What the progressives and Generation Jelly have is this designer compassion, this designer empathy, which is only reserved for people that they agree with or that fit into their perception of the world. What about the compassion of people seeing the city or the place that they grew up in transforming dramatically in speed and nature Does anyone have any compassion for how they must feel and understand why they must feel as they do? No. No. Because what they think, feel, and experience is irrelevant to this lot. And that is another reason why so many voted to come out of the EU. Because the referendum gave them the chance to express their voice that they've never had the chance to before. No political party represents them. And whenever they say, look, you know, the neighborhood or the city that I knew, it's completely changed. I don't recognize it. I feel, you know, that I'm not in the land that I grew up in. Then you're called racist. And the same would be true if, like the bloody British Empire, you went into other countries and changed them in the same way. It's no good just dismissing these people as racists. We have to look at how they feel and what they've experienced. And great numbers of them are absolutely not racist. Of course, there's racists. There were racists before. There was racist before the EU. There'd be racists after it. But most of them are not even complaining about the cultural change. It's the sheer bloody numbers. And this is what, you know, the progressives have no comprehension about. They couldn't care less. Where services are overrun simply by the number of people that are demanding them. And within the EU, there's no way that could ever slow down. But no, we have to do what these people want. And you know, and not understand those that are not racist, but are saying, this is my experience, and I don't like it. And also with this lot, some people can never do anything wrong or attract criticism. And yet others, doing the same thing or less, get criticized, condemned, and vilified. You know, racism is not the color of your skin. You don't have to be white to be a racist. You don't have to be white to be an unpleasant piece of work. As Martin Luther King so rightly said, it's not about the color of your skin, it's about the content of your character. But you can't judge people equally because this lot are on your bloody back. What kind of racism is that? It's exactly what it is, racism. We should all be treated the same, no matter what our background, color, creed, or culture. But see, what the program does is it stops people having the ability to see shades of grey. They can only literally, on every level, see black and white. So they polarize everything. Like, you know, they talk about hate. They say that the people that voted to leave the EU are somehow racist haters. And they say that with hatred in their faces and hatred in their words. They can't see that they're mirrors of everything that they claim to oppose. And then there's there's this other big area, which is this lack of research into what they're talking about before they frickin' talk about it. Generation Jelly is a classic, but these are some of the what people call lovies. Some of these clueless celebrities that pontificate on things without any research whatsoever. It's just a few. This is Gary Lineker former footballer, now presents football on television, after the Brexit vote. Feel ashamed of my generation. We've let down our children and their children. What, by taking them out of a tyranny? But you wouldn't know that, Gary, would you? Because the amount of research you've done, apart from that you've downloaded from the mainstream, zilch. And, you know, democracy only works if people are informed. If people don't get informed, then a democratic vote is not a free vote, because you're making it on the basis of skewed information, which has made you come to that conclusion. If people don't take the trouble to get informed, look at the history of the EU, look at the goals of the EU, look at the way the EU works, they can't possibly make an informed decision on whether to stay in or come out, but they do. Not an informed decision, but they make a decision based on the system's version of everything. It's a bloke called Richard Bacon. Last time I heard him, he was on the BBC radio. And every time I heard him, he was pushing the system's version of everything. He's saying, I feel so sad. It's so inward looking. What, giving your power away to bureaucrats? So ungrateful to Eastern European immigrants, so chippy, so economically illiterate, so sad. James Corden, comedian, now working in America. I can't get my head around what's happening in Britain. I am so sorry to the youth of Britain. I fear you've been let down today. Do some research, James, because you clearly haven't. And you'll realise that young people have just been got out of jail. Philip Schofield on this morning programme just woke up to see the result. Oh my God, what have we done? We've taken power back, or started the process, taken the power back for people in this country from a bureaucratic dictatorship. That's what we've done, mate. Do some research. Then we've got Damon Albarn, a frontman with the Blur group. He said at Glastonbury, democracy has failed us. Democracy has failed us by getting us to leave one of the most undemocratic political entities on earth. And then Michael Eavis, the Glastonbury organizer, and his daughter Emily tweeted a picture of a poem that was put on, displayed at the rock festival. And it ended this poem with, goodbye, old friend, we'll miss you a lot, our little mate, the EU. Oh my God! Our little mate, which daily deluges this country and every other country in Europe with rules, regulations and laws that have never been properly democratically debated and voted upon. An EU which, in the words of the Prime Minister David Cameron's former close advisor, Steve Hilton, an EU that is passing laws in this country without the Prime Minister of the country even knowing about it. Hilton has said that when he worked with Cameron, Cameron would find out, the so-called elected Prime Minister of this country, he would find out about new laws imposed by the EU on the news when they were announced. It's extraordinary that people could refer to that as our little mate. It's unbelievable. And here's the mentality that I'm talking about encapsulated. I mean, if it wasn't true, it would be hilarious. It still is, really. This is the politically correct Generation Jelly in all its glory. Headline, University of North Carolina, Christmas vacation is a microaggression now. A microaggression. That's not absolutely racist or sexist and all these other ists, but it's getting there, right? Some microaggression. Slap on the wrist instead of vilification. Well, we'll throw a bit of vilification in as well because we like that. Microaggression. How Orwellian can you get? This is it. The University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill issued a guide this week which instructs students that Christmas vacations and telling a woman, "I love your shoes," are microaggressions. Ooh. The taxpayer-funded, of course, guide entitled Career Corner, Understanding Microaggressions. I can't wait to read it. Also identifies golf outings and the words boyfriend and girlfriend as microaggressions. Christmas vacations are a microaggression, the public university pontificates, because, quote, academic calendars and encourage vacations which are organized around major religious observances, centralize the Christian faith, and diminish non-Christian spiritual rituals and observances. Well, so what? I mean, just a day. It's got a name. And most people who they're saying they must stop being upset by it couldn't give a shit. Couldn't care less. Just getting on with their lives. Often when these things come out, it's the people they're supposed to be protecting from being upset who say, look, what are you talking about? What's the problem? Because it's systematic. All this stuff is not about protecting people from being upset, primarily at all. It's about shutting up those with opinions outside what the state wants people to have in terms of opinions. The microaggression of liking shoes occurs when someone says, "I love your shoes," to a woman in leadership during a Q&A after a speech. So it's a very specific microaggression. The problem, the University of North Carolina document declares, is that the shoe admirer values appearances more than intellectual contributions. What you mean, like yours, like? Similarly, the public school pronounces interrupting any woman who is speaking is a microaggression. What if a woman interrupts? Is that all right? I don't suppose it work that one through. And in a world of equality, which the progressives are supposed to want, well, what about interrupting a man? Why isn't that a microaggression? Because it's all skewed, because it's nothing to do with protecting people. It's to do with shutting people up. Golf outings are a microaggression, the University of North Carolina says, because suggesting a staff retreat at a country club or even just a round of golf assumes employees have the financial resources to participate in a, quote, fairly expensive and inaccessible sport. You see what's happening? People are being pushed through tyranny and vitriol and laws now, so that they can say basically nothing that's acceptable, unless it's, within the postage stamp version of acceptable of the state. It's unbelievable. And people, and Generation Jelly, progressives, oh yes, oh this is all right, yeah, we support this. Wake up, for goodness sake. God, unbelievable. The words boyfriend and girlfriend, as well as husband and wife, are microaggressions. Ooh, here we go. The University of North Carolina admonishes because these words set the expectation that people do not identify as LGBTQ until they say otherwise or disclose their sexual orientation. The correct term now is partner and spouse, the UNC Chapel Hill demands. So I don't, because I don't give a shit. But how many people now who work in these places, work in universities and stuff, are actually going through a mental rehearsal before they dare say anything, in case they say something that upsets someone and starts the whole vitriolic cascade starting. People must be censoring themselves over and over and over again so they don't upset anybody. Come the day that I'll do that. And if people don't like it, well, they can do the other bloody thing. Because I am a unique individual and I will have my opinion. And you should have yours. But I'm not having your opinion through pressure and abuse. Bloody hell. In the same vein, bureaucratic forms only contain the options male and female. They're microaggressions. And it's also a microaggression to refer to men who dress up as women with the pronouns he or him. It should be a joke, right? It's not. It's not. The two lady authors of the UNC Chapel Hill Microaggressions Guide are Sharbari Day, an assistant director of multicultural affairs, and Krista Prince, a dorm life coordinator. I must invite them to dinner on a day I know I'm not in. In order to counter the multitude of microaggressions listed in the document, Day and Prince advise students to respond by interrupting and aggressively asking, "What do you mean by that?" But what if they're a woman? You can't interrupt them. Absolute freaking madness. Nice shoes, though. Those young people, and like I say, there are growing numbers, despite all this nonsense, and the rest of the population, who've actually retained a mind of their own, and actually have opinions that are not within the ludicrously tiny area of accepted opinion and imposed opinion and view. They need now to stand up and speak out. And yes, you'll get abuse from these morons, but what's the alternative? Letting the morons take over. I'm not having it. And, you know, if we want freedom and we want to retain the right to free speech, then we have to use it and go on using it and take the consequences of using it, because otherwise it's going to disappear. So, speak your truth. Speak your opinion. You know, this Brexit vote has been a great statement where people, despite all the establishment in all its endless forms, telling them to do one thing, they've said, no, we're doing this because that's what we feel. We've got to build on this and have people in the colleges, in the universities, in these other institutions, speaking their truth and not being cowed and bowed by these progressive dictators who talk about diversity in the very act of destroying it. Come on. It's time to stand up to this nonsense. Otherwise, this nonsense will be all that's left.